Hello, my name is Mr. Asprey and this is Edexcel IGCSE functions. All exam questions from past papers, let's get it. First one is f of 1. So f of 1 means that we need to substitute 1 in for x. So I replace the x with a 1. This gives me 3 over negative 1, which is the same as negative 3. 1 mark. State which value of x must be excluded from any domain of f. Well, there are two things we can't do in maths, and that is divide by 0. That's a big no-no. And the other one is to square root a negative. Now in this instance, we're not going to be square rooting a negative, there's no square root sign, but we might divide by 0 if the x was a certain value. So if the bottom of that fraction equals 0, that would be no good for us. So if x equals 2, that would be no good, so that needs to be excluded from the domain. Okay, next part is we have another function, g of x, and it's asking us to calculate f of g of 2. So what does this mean? Well, this means that I need to put 2 into g, and then to put that into f. So we go backwards like this. So put it into g, and then put the answer into f. So f of g of 2 is the same as f of whatever g of 2 is. So if I put 2 into g, I'm going to get 2 plus 4, which is 6. Then I need to put that into f, and if I put that into f, I get 3 over 6 minus 2. Which is equal to 3 over 4. Perfect. Okay, next question, and we have a new function and we're looking for f of 10. So to find f of 10, I need to substitute 10 into the function. So it's 2 times 10 over 10 minus 6, which is 20 over 4, which is 5. And next I need to find the inverse function. Now this is a really classic question, and in order to find the inverse function, what you need to do is set the function equal to y. So y being the output, x being the input. And then if I want to find the inverse, what I'm doing is I'm swapping over the outputs and the inputs, which means that x and y swap over. So I rewrite this as x equals 2y over y minus 6. And then what I need to do is rearrange and make y the subject of this equation. So by doing so, I'm going to multiply both sides by y minus 6. I'm then going to expand my bracket. And I'm going to want to move all the y's to one side. So I'm going to do that by adding the 6x to this side and then minusing the 2y to that side. This gives me all the y's on the same side, which means I can then take out a factor. So take out a factor of y, it leaves me with an x and a minus 2, and that equals 6x. And then finally I can divide through by the factor of x minus 2. Okay, this is my inverse function, and I can write that in its finished form as the inverse of f is equal to 6x over x minus 2. And there we have it. Okay, next question, we've got two functions, f and g, and it says state the value of x which cannot be included in the domain of g. Well, once again, we can't divide by 0, so this denominator can't equal 0. So if we set it equal to 0 and then solve for x, we will get the value of x, which is not allowed. So minus 1 over 3. Find g of f of x. Okay, so what we need to do is put x into f and then put that into g. Well, x into f is just f of x, so we know that already. And then we have to put all of this into g. So I write rather than having x on the top, I'm now inputting f of x into g. So I'm replacing that x with an f of x, which is 2x minus 3. And on the bottom, I've got 3 lots of x, which is now f of x. So 3 lots of 2x minus 3 plus 1. It does say simplify your answer, so I'm going to expand this out on the bottom to get 2x minus 3 over 6x minus 9 plus 1, which is the same as 2x minus 3 over 6x minus 8. And I could factorise the bottom, but it's not going to help me because I can't cancel any factors that are on the top and the bottom, so that's it. I'm just going to leave my answer like that. 2x minus 3 over 2 lots of 3x minus 4. Okay, great. And now it's asking me for the inverse of g. So once again, to find the inverse function, we set y equal to that function. We do the old swaparoo, swap the x's and the y's, like so, and then we multiply up, in this case, and expand, or it's going to give me 3xy plus x is equal to y. I'm going to bring all the y's together, like so. Oh, actually, no, I'm not going to do it that way, because that gives me 2 negative signs. If I do it the other way, I only get 1 negative sign, so it looks a bit nicer. So I'm going to keep the x on the left side, and I'm going to move the 3xy to the other side. Oh yeah, that's nice. And then I can factorise out of y, and I'm going to get 1, because 1 times y is y, and minus 3x, because minus 3x times y is minus 3xy. And then finally, I'm going to divide through by that factor. Perfect. This is my inverse function, so I just write it here. G to the minus 1 of x is x over 1 minus 3x. Beautiful. Next question, and we've been asked to find f of g of 3. So first off, let's find g of 3, which is subbing 3 in up here into g, which gives me minus 7. And then f of g of 3 is the same as f of minus 7. And subbing in minus 7 is going to give me minus 7 squared, put it in brackets to avoid any mistakes, which is 49 plus 6, so this gives me 55. Okay, solve the equation f of g of x equals f of x. Right, so g needs to go into f. So if I put g into f, that means I need to write out f, but replace the x with the whole of g of x. So it becomes x minus 10 squared plus 6. That's the f of g of x. And then the f of x, well, that's just f of x, which is x squared plus 6. Okay, I always do expanding brackets on the side over here, like this. Gives me x squared minus 10x plus 100. And then I can write it over here as x squared minus 20x, because the two negative 10s makes negative 20, plus 6 equals x squared plus 6. Oops, nearly forgot the 100 there. Plus 100 plus 6 equals x squared plus 6. There we go. Okay, solving an equation. Let's subtract x squared from both sides. Let's subtract 6 from both sides. So what have we got left? We've got minus 20x plus 100 equals 0. So 20x equals 100, so x equals 5. Job done. Okay, let's scroll down a little bit. We've got a new function now. It is h of x. And again, we're trying to find what needs to be excluded. Can't divide by 0, so therefore x can't equal 0. Inverse function, y equals the function. And then we do the swapperoo. So x gets swapped with y and vice versa. And then we need to make y the subject. So multiply both sides by y. And then we will move, what we're going to move? Let's move the 4 to this side and the x, y to this side. So it gives me 4 is equal to 2y minus xy. Yep, that looks good to me. So now we can take out a factor of y, and then we can divide through by that factor. Brilliant. And now we can say that the inverse function is 4 over 2 minus x. Beautiful. Okay, gets a bit more tricky now. We've got question 22. So this is right at the end of the paper, and this is a really common question that comes up. Having studied all the IGCSE papers, this question comes up so frequently nowadays, and that is to find the inverse function of a quadratic. Okay, so the trick, complete the square. If you don't know how to complete the square, check my completing the square video out. I'll link it here. And I'll do it as well. So what we're doing is we're always looking at this, the coefficient of the x. In this case it's minus 8. We half it, we get minus 4. So we write x minus 4 all squared, always minus, and then that value again minus 4 squared. And we've also got plus 5. Okay, and we're finding the inverse function, so we're going to set it equal to y, and then we'll do the swapperoo in a moment. Okay, this gives me x minus 4 all squared, and we're taking away 16, because minus 4 all squared is 16, and it's always a takeaway sign here. And then we're plussing on 5 as well. So we get y equals x minus 4 all squared minus 11. Okay, now I'll do the swapperoo, and I will write that the x's get swapped for the y's and vice versa, and then I'll make y the subject. So the reason why we've done this, by the way, is so that we've now only got, well, there's only one x here now. As before, there was an x and an x squared, so it's really hard to make x the subject when there's an x and an x squared. But now there's just a single x there, so we can hopefully rearrange this more easily. I'm going to add 11 to both sides, and then I'm going to square root. I'll do that up here. And let's remember, when we square root, we always get plus minus. And that is y minus 4 when the square root cancels out with the squared. And then I'm going to add 4 to both sides, so it reads 4 plus or minus the square root of x plus 11 is equal to y. Okay, now here comes the tricky bit. Selecting which one. Is it plus or is it minus? It has to only be one, because a function has to have a given output for a given input. So we can't have two different values here. And we're going to look at the domain of the original function. And the domain of the original function is that x has to be less than or equal to 4. So that means that all of the starting values, we call it the domain, has to be less than or equal to 4. And then these pass through the function, and they give us a set of outputs, which we call the range. And then the inverse function goes back the other way. So what does this tell us? Well, the inverse function, which we're trying to find, it has values which has to be less than or equal to 4. Those are the values it spits out, has to be less than or equal to 4. So which one am I going to use here? I know the square root has to be, I know that it has to be less than or equal to 4, so I have to take away the square root as opposed to adding it. Because if I were to add it, then it would be more than 4, which isn't allowed. And that is our inverse function. Right, let's have a go on the next one. Okay, f of g of 2. Well, first off, let's find out what g of 2 is. So let's sub in 2. So it's 7 times 2 minus 6, which is 14 minus 6, which is 8. So f of g of 2 is the same as f of 8. So subbing in 8 gives me 5 times 8 squared minus 10 times 8 plus 7. Right, I get to use the calculator for the first time. 5 times 8 squared minus 10 times 8 and then plus 7. Great, 2, 4, 7. Brilliant. And now let's find the inverse function. Again, this is question 24. This is it's a real common question. Inverse of a quadratic. Okay. So this time we've got to complete the square. And the x squared term isn't 1, it's 5. So we've got to take a 5 out of the two x terms. Oops, so when I take out 5, I'm going to get minus 2x. And I'm going to leave the plus 7 there. Okay. Next, completing this square, x squared minus 2x. I always look at the x term, which is minus 2, and we half it. So halving it gives me minus 1. So we write x minus 1 all squared, and we always take away, and it's that value again, minus 1, needs to be squared. And there's nothing else to add on, so that's it. So inside this square bracket, I'm going to get x minus 1 all squared minus 1 squared is just 1, so minus 1 plus 7, which is outside the bracket, and then I'm going to times this 5 by this bracket, and I'm going to times it also by minus 1. So this is going to give me 5 x minus 1 all squared minus 5 plus 7. So it's going to be 5 x minus 1 all squared plus 2. Okay, here comes the swapperoo. Let's swap over the x's and the y's. So we get x equal 5 y minus 1 all squared plus 2. And now let's make y the subject in order to find the inverse function. So I'm going to take away 2 from both sides. I'm going to divide through by 5. And this isolates the x minus 1 all squared. Now is the perfect time to square root. And when I do, I get plus or minus. That gets rid of the squared term. And then finally, let's add 1 to both sides. So 1 plus or minus the square root of x minus 2 over 5 is equal to y. Now we've got to select which one. Well, in order to do that, we look at the domain. And the excuse me. And the domain tells us that x is greater than or equal to 1. So our outputs of the inverse function must be greater than or equal to 1. So I must use the plus sign here, because they have to be bigger than 1, and if I was to use a negative, that would be taking away from 1. So it would be smaller than. Okay, so there it is. That is our inverse function. Okay, if you're still with me, you can again see how popular these questions are. They come up all the time. Inverse of a quadratic. So, and they're worth big marks as well, because they're question 25. Right, we've got to complete the square. We've got a negative x squared there, so I'm going to write minus 1 outside of the big brackets, x squared, and then minus 6x and then this plus 5 is going to stay outside the brackets. I take the x term, in this case is minus 6, and I half it, so I get x minus 3 all squared, and I always take away, and it's that term again, minus 3 squared. Okay, so I then realise that this is 9, so we're minusing 9, and then I'm going to multiply through by that minus 1, so into that bracket and into that minus 9. So I get minus the bracket, plus 9, because the two negatives, and plus 5. And this is all y equals. So we get y equals minus x minus 3 squared plus 14. Okay, now it's time for the swapperoo. So I'm going to replace the x with the y's and vice versa. Let's subtract 14 from both sides. And then this negative is annoying, so I'm going to divide by negative 1, which is going to get rid of the negative on the right side, and it's going to flip the signs of all of the terms on the left side. So the x becomes negative and the 14 will become positive. So it's 14 minus x. Okay, next step is to square root both sides, and that'll give me a plus or minus, and it will cancel the squared on the right side, and then I'm going to add 3 to both sides like so. And then I'm going to look at the domain, which is greater than or equal to 3, so I'm going to select that it must be the plus sign. So the function inverse of g is 3 plus the square root of 14 minus x. Okay, state the domain of g of x. Okay, well, the domain of g of x is all of the numbers which we can put into this function. And we know that we can't square root a negative. So underneath that square root must be greater than or equal to 0, because it can be 0. We can square root 0, that's no problem. Okay, so let's solve this then. So that's 14 is less than or equal to x. And that's it. So x needs to be less than or equal to 14. Because once again, this square root sign underneath it, it cannot be negative. So we must set it equal to or greater than 0. Okay, final question. Big up to anyone who's made it this far. The function h is such that h of x is equal to f of g of x. Okay, so let's put g into f. So I write out f of x. I write out f of x, but I replace the x's with whatever g of x is. So that's x squared minus 12x, and then plus the 25. Okay, which is x squared minus 12x plus 25. And then look at this, surprise, surprise. Again, find the inverse function of a quadratic. Okay, so let's see if we could do this super quick. Complete the square, like so. Write this as minus 36 plus 25. And minus 36 plus 25 is minus 11. Okay, swapperoo. I hope you'll see that this is such a common question, and once you know how to do it, you are getting yourself some seriously good marks. Add the 11, square root, plus or minus, add the 6, so it's 6 plus or minus the square root of x plus 11, and that is h to the minus 1 of x. Brilliant. Oh, Of course, check the domain. It has to be less than or equal to 6. So that means this time I need to take away from 6 to keep it under 6. So the inverse function of h is 6 minus the square root of x plus 11. And we are done. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, leave a like and a thumbs up and all that stuff. Fantastic. And on to the next topic. Bye for now.